Hello, everybody. I'm welcoming you all, our global audience, wherever you are. Here with me today, we have Alina Su. And again, we have an amazing speaker with a great story that can help you build your businesses and enter the United States market or on other podcasts, entering other markets. And in this particular case, we want to discuss regulatory environment when you are trying to get an FDA approval. And today's topic is quite interesting, integrating FDA regulatory requirements. So basically, many medical startups are at the stage of like, okay, I have a cool device and now I'm going to sell in the States. We're going to win the market because no one can do this. We are the so smart people in the world. But when they start selling it, all of a sudden they face a wall of challenges only with because of the regulations and the expensive and lengthy process, unclear process. You don't know where to go. You are going to some consultants or some other experts, and they charge a lot of money. And here today, we want to clarify the process that Alina went herself for her own company, doing this entire process from scratch to a final step to get FDA approval. Right, Alina?
That's correct. Thank you very much. So hello, everyone.
Yeah, hello. A few words about you, Alina. Just what I know, we recently met and we already inspired me with a few stuff. First of all, Alina, she's based in San Francisco Bay Area, and she's the founder and CEO of NovaXS Biotech. And she told me that she actually founded this company with the passion to help people. And with all medical devices, she faced this problem of getting FDA approval. And as a founder of building a company, it's not the only problem you're facing. You also need to meet your customers. You need to make sure that there is a cash flow. Oh, by the way, there is also a fundraising thing you shouldn't forget, because you run out of money and you're out of business. And she managed to solve all these problems. And now she's moving forward and can share with you this story. The other thing is interesting about Alina. She is an innovative entrepreneurship leader and patent inventor and intellectually adventurous globetrotter, as she says on her LinkedIn. And she has a passion for biology, health, and technology. Well, with all that, it's already inspiring to know you. And please give a little bit background of yourself. Give us some story of how you became a founder and how you managed to get to where you are. And of course, give us a little bit background of the projects you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So hello, everyone. Very great to sitting here and having talk with everyone here. My name is Alina, and also founder and CEO of NovaXS Biotech. And in NovaXS Biotech, why we are doing this project is because actually based on a personal story of my sister, Kathy. So she was having growth hormone deficiency since age 7. So that means she requires to inject herself every single day, maybe as many of your parents or family does. And when seeing this situation is going on since a very young age, since 7, for like more than 3 to 5 years, it's a very traumatic story. And also the entire process is very, very sad. And I want to do something as a sister and also a family who deeply loves her. So what we have created is a needle-free injection technology that is able to inject the medication, but without a needle. So when we are trying to push this technology into the market, that actually, it's a very great idea. People love it. Every single time we are talking to consumer and doing interviews, people love it about our product and bring a lot of suggestions how we should do it. But at the same time, for medtech devices, it's especially hard to pass the FDA approval, because that's a must-go-to process for all of the medical device startups. So that's why I'm here to sharing my experiences to found a medtech device startup, and also hope my experiences will be very helpful to many of entrepreneurs like you guys do.
Thank you so much, Alina. It's a very inspiring story, and I hope your sister is feeling well. This is how actually businesses happen. There has to be some challenge usually, or you are trying to solve something for yourself, and I'm sure this is why you get your first passion. And let's get to the topic today about FDA. Before we get into details about how to get an FDA approval and what the process looks like, uh, can you give a little bit of background? What is FDA and what it stands for, and what are the risks of having no FDA approval?
So basically, FDA is a regulatory pathway that they're the gatekeeper to make sure that every single devices or medicine or food or drug is able to get very safely and efficiently that is not going to harm people before you're even getting into the market. So you can think them as a gatekeeper to make sure that people are healthy and also making sure that your device is good and making benefits for the users. So FDA is actually helping us a lot during the journey because they truly cares about the people and the patients in the world. So bringing them as a friend but not an enemy, that will be a good description that I will take as a founder and entrepreneur by myself. And there are several pathways for FDA to get FDA approval according to different devices class. For example, class 1 device that is mainly focusing on if you're not that invasive and your devices is least risk and also least regulated. So that means class 1 medical device sometimes it doesn't need any approval to get directly into the market. So class 2 is what we are doing for this needle-free injector, and that is count as moderate risk and regulation. And some of the class 2 devices also didn't need to go through any of the FDA process and can directly go to market. But that depends on what kind of device you have. And you can go to their website because they have a very good regulation for what kind of device is count as class 2 and what kind of device is counted class 1 or what kind of device is counted class 3. So class 3 it means you have most risk and regulatory control. And that means if you're developing a very innovative product that nobody has ever developed before, you are automatically classified as class 3. And that means you are having a stricter regulatory approval process because you have to prove that your device is safe and also effective to use.
Right, and FDA is known for its lengthy process and complex process, also an expensive process. Can you give an example? You don't have to share your numbers. If you can, of course, that it's amazing. But can you give some price ranges of potential costs that people can estimate for getting into this process, and also the timeline, potentially or average timeline people may just foresee when they try to estimate something?
So for example, for 510K, that's called pre-market notification, and that's required for a small number of class 1, but mostly class 2 device. And that only requires 10% of like clinical data. Only like 10% of those medical devices requires clinical data, but it's mainly focusing on how is your medical device is working. And that FDA approval is receiving about 4,000 application each year, and decision time is around 90 days. But right now, the average decision time, to be honest, will be at least 8 months, according to my friend who is actually working in FDA. So that's also because delayed off pandemic, everything is going online, and there's a lot of applications going on. So that's why people are moving slower and slower. But the user fee for standard is around, I would say, 12,000 for application for 510K. But for small business, they actually have a less fee that they're collecting around 3,000 just for application fee. But I would say the most like costing is actually hiring a FDA agent that is helping your application to prepare all of the data. And that consulting fee is costing a lot rather than the FDA process.
So it's not a person that is from FDA, it's a like third-party consultant
Yes.
that will take care of it.
Yes. And it's very important because those consultant is able to provide you a regulatory strategy, like how are you positioning yourself? What kind of data are you providing? Do you need to provide all of the function at the same time, or do you divide it into different stage to apply for a faster FDA trial? So that also depends on like how skillful is that agent is, and how are you positioning yourself as a marketing value prop.
That's an interesting one. How would you choose the right agent, and how would you evaluate the right skill sets, and what is the price ranges?
So the price ranges I've seen in the market is around 800 to 1,000 per hour. It's super expensive, but I would say if you want to find a very good agent, it will be referred by a friend. It They have used them before and they know that they're legit and they're very experienced. So it will be a best way to actually reach out to your agent and talk to them as a friend as first and ask them about how do you think their strategy will be applied on your device, and also just bring them as a part of the team. Let them know what your business is working on, how do you generate revenue, so that they can maximize the effectiveness of getting FDA approval.
It's an interesting strategy. So the question I have is that how should you integrate FDA approval into the product design? I know you had some challenges and you probably have some process in mind. So can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So the medtech founders, especially because we have to go through FDA. So I would recommend if you are able to get in touch with FDA, any of the agents or who are working in FDA as soon as possible. They'll be very helpful for when you're designing your product, because the entire process of designing product is first you validate what the problem is, and second you design your product. How are you able to solve that problem? But third, when you're designing the function of the product, that actually involves what are you applying for FDA, because depends on different function you need to design different mechanism of devices. How are you able to achieve that? And some of them might be risky. For example, for us, we are trying to design a needle-free injector but also with drug enhancement function. So that means we're designing a electroporation, like electrostimulation site at the front of the device. But FDA is very hesitant for that because never it was used on human, and also it's very innovative. So that means it's delaying our process for actually getting the product into the market. So that's why we have eliminated that function, because after we are talking to a lot of consumers, we found that what they're truly caring about is actually the device itself for injecting, but not the efficiency of medication enhancement. So really taking absorbing different voices from the consumer, but also FDA agent, you're able to generate a holistic view of how should you design the entire pathway for FDA approval, and also how should you design your product design, because it will be very hard to revise any product design after you have done manufacturing. And as we all know, manufacturing takes a lot of time. You have to do the part source, and also you have to do the failure test, all of those detailized testing. If you choose one of them to be changed, it will cost like a lot of time and energy and also money to revise anything.
Yeah. What is the most expensive element in this process? The customer interviews, or like not interviews, I guess, some markets tests. I don't know how, clinical trials, I guess you call it like this, right? So can you talk a little bit about clinical trials in here?
Yeah, absolutely. So different devices have different requirement, and most of them actually doesn't require any clinical trial. It's not called clinical trial, but also testing on human. So after you're passing 510K or even before 510K, if you're partnering up with clinics or also hospitals, you are able to test this device on human if it's not invasive and safe for human use. For example, for data collection devices for pulses, that means you're able to directly apply to human and collect the data from them, and also use it as a consumer exposure to test how they're reacting to that. But for us, for the injector, you have to get the 510K in order to actually use on human. So that's why it was costing a lot of time, and we are trying to get the FDA approval as fast as possible. But I would say it's not expensive, but it's very time consuming. So it will be very good to have a strategy plan at very first step, like how are you positioning yourself to minimize this time spending, because it will be very complicated to do any of the revision after you're getting the data for electro safety testing, electromagnetic complications, integrating the protection rating, and also shipping stimulation, extreme temperature. Those are all changed if you are changing one of the function.
It's an interesting to know as well. How do you make this connection with an FDA, like how, in fact, how do you talk to FDA agent or FDA organization so to make it process efficient and stable?
Yeah, so FDA themselves, they actually have a department specialized in servicing those startups and answering their questions called RQM. And that department is specifically designed for answering any of the questions that you might be hesitant. And they're doing a very good job in educating the market, especially for startups who are trying to get FDA approval. So it'll be very, very truly helpful to actually get on their website and talk to that department, sending them emails and get in touch with them and ask them any question that you may have, because they truly want to help you guys. And that department is specially designed for solving the problems for startups or for the founders who are trying to get FDA approval.
All right, and primarily, who would do the communication, the founder or the consultant? What would you recommend?
Yeah, so 2 steps. So for the founders, if you're ever a first-time founder for a medical device, I highly recommend you to actually learn about FDA regulatory approval to see which kind of devices are you having and what category are you, to actually learn about what is, for example, 510K, that means clearance, PMA, that means approval, de novo, that means granted, and EUA, that means authorized. So you know all of those terms. That's kind of second language. So you have to learn about those before you are actually hiring a consultant, or whatever they're telling you, you don't know is that correct or not. So first, learn by yourself and take a look at all of the regulatory approval process and to know about what are you expecting. And then to find a very good advisor, for example, those agents, to actually helping you to design a better specific way, especially targeting your device, because they have much more experiences than you. But you have to, at the first stage, understand the fundamental knowledge and all those terms, what that means.
What are the tools and resources did you use to learn about the FDA process, and that would help you to get up and running, to get confident in these next steps?
Yeah, I would say actually FDA did a very good job in actually publishing videos on YouTube. And that is a very strict, like direct way that I've learned how do you differentiate different pathway and how do you regulate that. But in order to get a deeper knowledge, just directly go to their website. And that's super clear that what kind of medical devices do not need any of the clarification. So such as class 2 medical device, they don't need, like every single device doesn't need for a 510K clearance. If you are, for example, targeting, let me see, I'm on the website right now. For example, for clinical chemistry and clinical toxicology device and biological product standards for like general biological products and neurological device or orthopedic device, those are count as class 1 and class 2, but they're exempt. So that means you don't need any 510K clearance. So just take a look at their website and it's super clear, and they are listing all of these to telling you what kind of devices are exempt for 510K approval. You can directly skip it.
Yeah, this is actually a very good point. Sometimes people go into consultants before they even look at the website. They just, because they're so much scared, and they can get so much information on the website and get well versed in the basics at least, and then they can go to the consultants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also, it will be very helpful to actually take a look at your competitors if you are doing a medical device, because usually for 510K, that means you have a predicate device. So that predicate device means it's already legally marketed device, and it's very similar to what you're building, but they have already passed the 510K. So that means if you know their 510K filing, which you can find on FDA database, if you know what kind of data they have provided to FDA, you can directly use their data to know what kind of data you need to provide to FDA. So it's a very, very clear data, like what you need to provide for the mechanism, what you need to test it for the device itself. So that's very clear. So I would highly recommend to take a look at your competitors, like FDA approval process and what kind of file they have been filing. And that can be all found in FDA database as well.
Okay, that's actually a good point about competition. This is something you might forget, and all of a sudden you have some additional data that already your competitors have done. I agree with that. It's another way of applying it. Sometimes I apply it through marketing and positioning, but at the same time, you can also use it for FDA. But in terms of timeline, how do you utilize your timeline when you're doing FDA approval?
So when we have actually engaged FDA with our product design is when we're at the stage of, I would say, risk analysis, and actually when we're contacting with the consumers and we know what kind of function we want to develop. That is the stage when we're already engaging with FDA to see what kind of function do we need to develop for our devices and how is its strategy. For example, going back to the example for when we are developing electroporation, that was what we thought. We can get approval very fast because it's safe to use, but what FDA has given feedback to us is that it is a very novel combination. So you might it going to class 2 into class 3. So that means you require a much longer time for getting any of the approval. But we are a 2C product. So that means we need to go to market as soon as possible. So that's why we have eliminated that function. So the development has like automatically cut, and that actually give us a lot of time to push into market much more faster.
Oh, so you can, understanding your risk analysis, you can actually reapply the strategy for product development and go-to-market strategy, then avoiding the lengthy process of getting an approval at this stage, you getting to the market faster. This is a fascinating example, actually. This is what you applied. Am I correct as well in your?
Yes, that's correct.
That's a great example to the founders. I think it's something they can look at and might increase their speed to market. So I guess this is also you can use to fundraising. So you get the first step, and then if you want to go something big, you already validated your market, and so you can fundraise a larger round and hire very expensive consultants who can get you up and running faster.
Exactly.
All right, that's thanks for that. Also, what's an interesting, we had an interesting conversation with you regarding the comparison with other countries. Can you compare this FDA process with the countries you know? I know you know well China, Korea, maybe a little bit understanding of Europe. So how fast and how expensive it's in there versus the one in the United States?
So for company in Europe, I actually see a lot of company are trying to get the CE mark and getting approval in Europe, but FDA requires you to, especially passing FDA in order to enter into US market. So that's a very high barrier for entering into US market. But when we are entering around, I'm not sure about Europe, but in, for example, China, they actually have a 6-month approval rate. After you are getting the FDA approval in US, you are automatically granted for CFDA in China. And for Korea, they actually have a much more faster approval rate for like 30 days. And that is very fast. So that means actually FDA approval, that gives you a lot of priority and also incentives to actually apply to a wider range of marketing in different countries. So they are lowering the barrier of entering into different market. So that also, you might need to think of like which market you want to target first, because that requires you to having different data sets and also filing different application.
Well, the other thing is very complex for founders, and it's a little bit beyond FDA approval, is fundraising and grants. So usually when you start a company, you are getting traction, then you go to your investors and say, and you get a quick check, like, I mean, in ideal world. In here with the device, with the FDA approval, it's not like that. It's lengthy, expensive, and you still don't have money to get it up and running. How did you get your first funding to finance this story? And what recommendation would you have for those who are in the same shoes they can't get FDA approval?
Yeah, it's very interesting because for us, our first target was not a very massive disease like insulin or the growth hormone distribution, but targeting DMD, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So that's a very rare disease for children who are from 3 to 20 years old and having constant muscle degeneration. And that's also counted as a orphan drug. So that means we are able to fall into a HDE review. That means a green accelerated pathway specifically designed for right now. There's no any solutions, and also for pediatric use. And that actually only takes like 75 days for FDA to grant it any approval. So it's very helpful to actually take a look at like what kind of specific category is your device is falling to. And HDE, that means humanitarian use device, and that means with the empathy you are approving this device much more faster comparing to any other device. And that proof of device is very unique. If you're proving that there's anything like this and your device can solve this problem, that means you're on the accelerated track. So we are very clear that we are on that track, and our investor know that as well because they have done any of the competition analysis and they know there's no devices like us specifically targeting this market. So they are quite confident that we're able to get this approval even before we are filing our 510K. So that actually gives us a lot of confidence. If you have a very like straightforward and also very clear regulatory pathway, and you're telling your investor that you know what you're doing and this is the expectation, that is the milestone, and what is the timeline. So that will be very helpful. And especially, it's very important that we got into MHub Baxter's Accelerator Program. So Baxter is one of the largest medical device company in US, and they are incubating 6 startups last year, like worldwide. And we are in one of the 6 as the batch. So they are providing us all of the device manufacturing, product design, hiring engineering team, in hospital trial run, and connecting us with FDA agent and also with the medical like reimbursement. So they actually help us a lot in entering into this world and accelerate the entire process because they are the expert in that area. So that is how we got the investment and also how we're able to design our specific pathway very successfully. And they actually is the first investor who is invested in us. So when granting this very high, I would say, name of Baxter that is backing us, investors having some like confidence in us that, oh, this guy is doing something legit.
Yeah, that's usually how it works with investors if there is some trust. Can you just give a few details about this program, like what is the criteria, or what is the share, like how much equity they take, what else they looking at?
Right. So they're a very new accelerator program, just started, I think, 3 years ago in Chicago. And MHub as a very large production site and also manufacturing site. They themselves have their own engineering team and product development team, and also engineers who can actually work on your product, and you can hire them as your team as well. So they are taking 5% of the equity, but they're doing investment at the same time. So I would say that is a very cost-effective trade-off because they're providing you a lot of resources in the medtech and also healthcare industry, and connecting you with a lot of different resources with such as hospitals, doctors, those FDA regulators, and to let you know what are you exposed into. So for example, our batch, there are 6 startups, and 5 other startups are focusing on different things like tracking of the medication intake, and there is a very small implants to stimulate the heart implant, and also another startup who is focusing on a eye drop, like directly targeting those people who are having diabetes, and when they're having side effects, they are like immediately know what's going on. So the smart medical device is the trend I'm seeing in the entire medical device industry. Yeah.
Well, that's a fascinating story, and I'm really grateful that you shared this. Before we close, is there anything else would you recommend to the founders in the States and globally entering the States when they are approaching FDA approval process and they are scared of this or don't know where to start?
I would say at first you need to understand what problems you're solving, and how you're understanding that is actually talk to as many people as you can. And when you're doing those consumer interviews, you're finding a pattern that they're constantly telling you one problem that they want to solve. And if your product is directly targeting that problem, for example, for us, we thought at first we are solving the problem for people who are afraid of needles, so we eliminate the needle. But we find that the people are frustrating not only because there's a needle, but also they don't understand their body, like what's happening in my body, and I want to know like what's happening. So that's why we are targeting a IoT function with this device, able to track the injection data and also collecting all of the data from, for example, glucose level, heart rate, to have you see how this medicine is impacting you as a person, to have a better understanding as a like patient yourself. So that truly solves the problem for the patients. And then you are knowing what is the priority of solving the problem. For example, the functionality of electroporation that might be not that important for those people who are using your product, that consumers. And then involving FDA as fast as possible, hiring a very good agent that can help you actually understand what is the regulatory approval process. That'll be some advice I would like to give to you guys.
Thank you so much. And that was Alina Su, the founder of MedTech startup from San Francisco Bay Area. And she gave us the story of how to get an FDA approval. And she walked us through this process. Before we close, I also want to announce that this is not all. We are planning to do a webinar with Alina and we'll share more details on about her startup and her story. And the topic will be how to make a medtech startup successful in the United States. And we specifically want to touch on getting IPs, a little bit on FDA, not as much as we now did, and how to talk to hospitals to get traction and other things. So to get you up and running and getting successful with the thing you're trying to create and making the world a better place. Thank you, Alina, so much. Thank you for sharing this story. And everyone who has any questions to Alina, just go to the comments, leave us some comments, ask your questions. If some questions will be relevant, we'll pass it to Alina, and if she would have some time, we'll get you the answer. In the meantime, please like our video, share it, and of course, subscribe to our channel. It will help to share this knowledge with the rest of the world who is building something that deserves attention and may help other people in future. So right now I'm stopping the live stream. I'll see you everyone in the next podcast and webinar.